Welcome to Crossroads. President Donald Trump is moving to ban large institutional investors from buying up single-family homes. No more of that. And he's saying that people live in homes, not corporations. Also, in other news, America has a brand new food pyramid, and guess what's at top? Meat. And there's also a new focus on real food. And on another topic, the Trump administration is making its conditions clear for Venezuela after the arrest of Maduro. They want China, Iran, Russia, and Cuba out of the country. And as this happens, the Trump administration is also talking about taking Greenland while they're at it. Now look, first off, let's jump into it also on another topic of Venezuela. I released a special report on the subversive history behind everything that's happening and also how this is going to converge into dramatic capture of Maduro. What happened with that? Was it about regime change? Was it about oil and resources? Was it about drugs and stopping the cartels? Well, actually, it's all those things. And I go into depth explaining actually it's a lot more. There's a lot more going on you're not being told about. This feature delves into these topics. It's the Venezuela operation, why the Maduro raid is only the beginning. And it's out right now. You can watch it clicking the link in the description below or in the live chat. And let me show you the trailer for it. There's a lot more happening in Venezuela than meets the eye. Now, the country's leader until recently, Nicolas Maduro, he was captured, flown to the United States in a daring special operations raid. The United States is going to be briefly overseeing the transition of government in Venezuela. American warships, they were moved nearby to the Caribbean, and President Trump is now suggesting similar actions could be used against other countries tied in with the drug trade. But it's fair to ask, what's actually going on? Is this about regime change? Is this about oil or resources? Is it about drugs and stopping the cartels? Well, it's actually all of those, but there's a lot more to it. What we're watching take place on the surface in Venezuela is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, this is available to watch right now. I'd say it's very important to see actually because I explain a lot of context, historical context, and views on what's happening behind the scenes that I really haven't seen anyone else talking about, frankly. I do think this is important to understand when viewing what's happening in Venezuela and what matters for basically the rest of the world. The link will be in the live chat and the description below, so be sure to check it out. And now on to today's stories. Now, the United States is facing a housing crisis. I don't tell you that. Rents are crazy high. They've been going up even more. And, well, there's no end to sight in some areas, but now there is. Now, part of this ties into mass illegal immigration. Part of it ties into the fact that we're not building enough new homes. And a big part of it is that major investment firms were buying up all single-family homes. And now President Donald Trump just announced that trend is coming to an end. Trump is announcing he is working to stop investment firms from buying more single-family homes. Here's him on Truth Social. He said, "For a very long time, buying and owning a home was considered the pinnacle of the American dream. It was the reward for working hard and doing the right thing. But now, because of the record-high inflation caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats in Congress, the American dream is increasingly out of reach for far too many people, especially younger Americans." And he says, "It is for that reason and much more that I am immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it." He said, "People live in homes, not corporations." He said, "I will discuss this topic, including further housing and affordability proposals and more, at my speech in Davos in 2 weeks." Now, this is a big deal, by the way. There's been a weird agenda taking place where major investment firms, BlackRock is the one a lot of people talk about, they've been buying up single-family homes. Now, part of that alongside it has been different squeezes on the market, green energy squeezes, other things, making it so that zoning laws do not allow the construction of new single-family homes. It's only townhouses, apartments, and things like that, meaning the value of single-family homes goes up. Now, who benefits when the value of single-family homes goes up? The people who own them. And the issue you're having now is that homes are being treated as investment pieces by major corporations and massive investment firms. and not as places where people are supposed to live. You also have the issue that foreign investors, foreign buyers are also scooping them up. You have the issue that basically there's a massive, massive increase in demand artificially created for single-family homes. Competition with illegal immigrants, competition with foreign buyers, competition with, again, investment firms, even banks getting them. And amid that massive, competition for the homes, there is not enough new construction to even compensate for the people who need homes who are just American citizens, because they flooded the country with tens of millions illegal immigrants. Meaning, well, they've artificially inflated the housing market. A big question is, was that done intentionally? A big question was somebody doing that on purpose to make money off, well, real estate? We don't really know. We'll find out maybe. But importantly, what's now taking place is that, at least on the investment side, on the major investment side, Trump is saying he's going to put a stop to it. This will not mean that major investment firms had to hand off all the homes they've bought, but it does mean they probably cannot keep buying homes, meaning new constructions, if they change the zoning laws and allow for them, new constructions of single-family homes hopefully will be more affordable to the average American. We'll see how it goes. Now look, in other news, America now is a brand new food pyramid, and meat is at the top, a new focus on real food. Now let me show you this, all right? This is the actual realfood.gov website. They actually started it. It says, for decades, we've been misled by guidance that prioritized highly processed food and are now facing rates of unprecedented chronic disease. Further, it says, we can solve this crisis. For the first time, we're calling out the dangers of highly processed foods and rebuilding a broken system from the ground up with gold standard science and common sense. Introducing the new pyramid. And it's interesting, right? So this brand new food pyramid puts meats, cheeses, dairy, vegetables at the top, then fish, nuts, fruit, butter, real butter, by the way, olive oil and like, and then whole grains at the bottom. You might notice that ultra-processed foods are not there. You might notice that things like seed oils are not there. You might notice that a lot of junk food is not there also. That kind of never was. This is a big shift. This is a very big shift. So there's been a lot of criticism over the years that the food pyramid is inverted, that the bottom should be at the top and the top should be at the bottom. There have also been a lot of arguments that the food pyramid that's been presented to Americans on what you should feed your kids and so on was not really a healthy system, not something that would mean you'd have a healthy diet. What this does now places a lot of emphasis on eating meat, animal products, again, cheese, milk, yogurt, that type of thing, and of course, eating more vegetables, right? This is a big shift. Also, the use of natural oils, natural fats. We've been told for a long time that these are all bad for you, at least fats. Not the case. This is now a very, very different take on what is actually good for you. And it says here, eat real food, meaning, again, they're pushing back against the ultra-processed food industry. Now, why does this also matter? So with the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again, and RFK Jr. going at it, they're going after companies, food additives, artificial colorings, weird ingredients, chemicals, and so on that have basically found their way into our food. They're arguing that these things contribute to the chronic disease epidemic, that kids especially are having this crazy just boom in chronic diseases. Americans, despite being one of the wealthiest countries on earth, are some of the most healthy people on earth. And that's probably not because of just solely our lifestyles. A lot of it is about the food we eat. And a lot of that is because we've kind of been sold garbage for a long time. They're trying to change that. The Trump administration has a brand new policy, really going at this. RFK Jr. is pushing very hard. And remember, RFK Jr. used to be a Democrat. And they're really trying to change the way we eat food. They want to make it so Americans are not buying just massively processed food as much, and have a focus on maybe cooking your own meals, have a focus maybe on pre-cooked meals or prepared meals. So some companies do those. And also why this matters. As they begin to change the market, as they begin to change what is recommended, what does that mean? If consumers demand it, meaning if you and I go to the supermarket And rather than buy ultra-processed food or whatever we like to get, we instead choose to get a big slab of meat and a nice big thing of butter and some yogurt and maybe some fish and vegetables and nuts. If we do that, it means the market will compensate for that, meaning you'll probably see less of a focus on ultra-processed foods, and with more demand, actually, you might even see the cost of many real foods go down. It will be more prevalent, more common, and probably a lot better for us. So we'll see. Now, also on another topic, the Trump administration is making its conditions clear for Venezuela, which apparently America might govern for years now. And this is after the arrest of Maduro, of course. I'll be talking about what's ahead after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. The Trump administration has its conditions clear for Venezuela. This is after the arrest of Maduro. And what do they want? Well, they want China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba out of the country. Now, I'll explain why it's such a big deal. But first, let me show you ABC. It says the Trump administration has told Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, that the regime must meet the White House's demands before being allowed to pump more oil, according to 3 people familiar with the administration's plan. It says, first, the country must kick out China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba, and sever economic ties, the sources said. Why is this such a big deal? Well, again, if you haven't watched yet, check out the special feature I just published on Venezuela, and you'll note something interesting. What happened with Venezuela is that the Venezuelan regime under Chavez worked with Cuba under Fidel Castro and worked to push the United States out of all of Latin America. They established multiple intergovernmental organizations throughout all of Latin America that did not include the United States. And then they made massive, like hundreds upon hundreds of trade deals with China and Russia. And they also imported, even giving visas and so on, to Iranian agents, including with Hezbollah and Hamas, allowing them to travel freely across different regions, and were even using planes, according to court filings, to give people diplomatic clearance to traffic drugs. And so, while they were talking about independence and not being invaded and getting the gringos out and pushing out America, they were importing CCP influence. They were importing Russian influence. Something else interesting here, around Maduro, there were dozens of Cuban agents. We know this because Cuba came out and admitted it, because our special forces guys went and killed a whole bunch of them. And what happened is this. There have been many accusations in Venezuela, in Brazil, that Cuba has effectively subverted and has been controlling their governments for a very long time. There have been allegations in many Latin American countries that Cuban intelligence officers have taken over the militaries, that Cuban intelligence officers control key political figures. And why does this also matter? Because China and Cuba worked to establish the drug trade in the time of Mao Zedong and Fidel Castro also, meaning Cuba works as these special agents helping facilitate the drug trade, working hand in hand with the Chinese Communist Party. And so now with Trump saying, hey, if you want to have oil money, Venezuela, which is their entire economy other than drugs, you got to kick out China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. No more of that. In other words, America is retaking the country. America is coming back in. It's the Monroe Doctrine, or now as they're calling it, the Donroe Doctrine. And the CCP is getting pushed out especially. Now they say here again, in addition to that, second, Venezuela must agree to partner exclusively, right, only with America, with the U.S. on oil production and favor America when selling heavy crude oil, they added. Why is that a big deal? It's because despite sanctions and so on, China, Iran, Cuba as well, they've been buying a lot of Venezuelan oil. And some people would say, well, technically it was not that much. Why is that? It's because it was black market. People are being dishonest with you. Why is it technically not that much? Because what they're technically talking about is just what's on the books. The oil was sanctioned. Obviously, they're not going to document it. They were doing dark ship operations. Where they go there, they turn their transponders off, they go dark, and they traffic the oil. This was trafficking. Of course, it's not on the books. The media is so dishonest with this, it's incredible. They're not telling you that one key piece of information to understand the necessary context of, gee, they say China doesn't buy that much, they buy a ton. But the problem is, again, the oil was sanctioned. There were sanctions on it. That's why they had to violate sanctions to import it. And it's also why America is now seizing some of the tankers. There's a whole a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of dishonesty with the way the story's been told to you. So this is what's really happening. Now, like on that point also, a lot going on. Venezuela is going to be transferring a very large amount of its oil to the United States as part of the transition of power. Trump said this on Truth Social. He said, I am pleased to announce that the interim authorities in Venezuela will be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil to the United States of America. He says this oil will be sold at its market price, and that money will be controlled by me as President of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. On this point, and there's been a lot of media finagling on this too, even the oil companies are saying this, Trump is saying it, his administration is saying it. We'll see if it happens, but this is what they are saying. They're not just stealing this from Venezuela. They're going to be selling it at market value, and the money from that, first of all, selling it to America, but the money from that being sold at market value will also go to Venezuela, just not to a bunch of corrupt cadres. They're saying it will go to the people of Venezuela, help rebuild their country, help stabilize their country, and we'll see what that looks like in terms of who's going to be doing the stabilization, because right now they're saying America probably will not have to have a presence there militarily. I wonder if that's going to be possible, to be honest, but they're saying that they believe they can do it. You're going to have to deal with a lot of the thugs of Maduro, the militias, the guerrilla forces coming in from Colombia. You're going to have to deal with that. Maybe America will handle that. Maybe somebody else will. Maybe they'll create some kind of regional security force. We will have to wait and see. But what is going to be happening is that Venezuela's main export, other than drugs, which is oil, basically their entire economy, it's going to be America getting the priority with it. Yes, the money's still going to Venezuela. No, America's not stealing it. That's the narrative here. It just means that China's not going to be getting it, not as much anyway. Now, Trump also says, I've asked Energy Secretary Chris Wright to execute this plan immediately. It'll be taken by storage ships and brought directly to unloading docks in the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, like also on the talk of Venezuela, I spoke with NTD Washington correspondent Luis Martinez. Great guy, I've worked with him for a long time. He's from Venezuela originally, and he gave some really valuable insights into what's been happening, like what Venezuela was like before Chavez and how it turned into what it is today. Let me show you this. Watch.
Well, Venezuela was actually the most prosperous country in South America before Chavismo and Maduro came into power. Like people would joke in the 70s and 80s that it was cheaper if you lived in Caracas to go shopping in Miami than to stay in Venezuela. And it was something that, like, actually a lot of people in the middle class would do. They would just take trips to other countries just for shopping because it was a very, very prosperous country. The NASA wanted to put launch pads in Venezuela. Disneyland wanted to open theme parks in Venezuela. And it was also the longest standing democracy in the region, because while other countries in Latin America through 60s, 70s, and 80s had military dictatorships, Venezuela was a beacon for democracy in South America.
Yeah, and how did things change after, the political changes that took place?
Well, Hugo Chavez was elected in 98, took power in 1999. He ran through a moderate platform promising pro-business policies, and soon after he just started expropriating private industry and making it national, and promoting what he called the socialism of the 21st century, or the Bolivarian revolution. So pretty much took all the industry in the country and made it belonging to the government, and started huge welfare programs subsidized by oil revenues. And when the oil prices went down and the production capacity of Venezuela started deteriorating because of lack of investment in the oil industry, then everything collapsed to the point that over a third of the country was malnourished. Long lines just to get basic foods and goods on supermarkets. So yeah, it became from the richest country in the region, vast mineral resources, very educated population, best hospitals in the region, to pretty much one of the poorest countries in the world with over 300,000% hyperinflation rates. We're down there with Zimbabwe and Haiti in terms of human conditions of living. And that was in a span of 20 years, which is a lesson to be learned of how quickly socialism and communism can destroy a country.
That's pretty Venezuela underwent one of the greatest reductions in wealth of any country on earth in recorded history outside of war. And so just the quality of life there just was annihilated by Maduro and Chavez. Now, on the point also, we talked about the general sentiment Venezuelans have of Chavez and Maduro and the capture of Maduro and what this means. Let me show you this. Watch.
Well, Venezuelans have been waiting for this moment for over 20 years. It's actually like an ongoing theme in the Venezuelan mind. Every December, you'd reach the end of the year, and December is usually when there were elections in Venezuela, and people would think like, well, maybe this is the year that something happens. Maybe this is the year that either they don't steal the elections or someone intervenes and allows for democracy to be restored in Venezuela. So it was incredibly welcomed. You could even see it in all the social media videos in Venezuela of what was happening. People saying, please protect civilians, God bless and protect the Venezuelan people, but celebrating the ousting of Maduro. Now, there's obviously right now some sort of quietness in Caracas and in the country, because this has happened before, Joshua. Back in 2002, Hugo Chavez, when he was in power, was ousted by the military for a period of like 48 hours and then was restored into power, and then they purged the military of anyone who opposed him. So right now, everyone's waiting to see whether this is a real transition, if there's real change coming or not. Obviously, the swearing in of Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and the images of still Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the Minister of Defense, and Diosdado Cabello, the Minister of Interior, during that swearing in ceremony, warn of some caution of whether or not this is regime change, or as Marco Rubio has said, a change in a behavior of the regime, not necessarily regime change.
Important context, right? Now, in terms of the ability of the United States to stabilize the country, public sentiment is going to, of course, matter a lot. One thing that makes Venezuela unique, as opposed to, I don't know if Trump's going to do stuff against other countries in that region, but one thing that makes Venezuela unique was that Maduro actually did lose the election back in 2018 and just decided to stay in, meaning he does not have popular support of the Venezuelan people. He does not. And the other issue you have now is that despite this sentiment, the Venezuelan people are being suppressed. This ties into the militias roaming around. I wanted to get more information on this. This is what we talked about. Watch this.
So this actually started with Hugo Chavez, and it's part of of the repressive apparatus of the regime. It rules through fear. So it would arm and quote unquote empower local groups in neighborhoods called colectivos that would have sponsorship by the regime, would receive weapons from the regime to carry out their hostilities and instill fear in the population. And actually, what we've seen in the past 48 hours is that these colectivos or local gangs have received, by decree of the government of Delcy Rodriguez, the authority. Well, and actually, people are speculating that this was pushed by the Minister of Interior, Diosdado Cabello, the authority to search people, search their phones, see if they've been promoting or celebrating the capture of Nicolás Maduro, and sort of threatening consequences. Some people have already been detained. Even 14 journalists that had attended the swearing-in of Delcy Rodriguez on Monday were detained for a period of 24 hours, and all of their computers, phones, and communications subjected to search by the regime. So it's part of what the regime has been preparing for, which is to have all of these alternatives to show that they can resist any change being imposed either internally or externally through violence. And the images are quite worrisome to see civilians with long rifles in the busiest streets of Caracas just stopping people and asking for their.
Now, we'll have to see what it looks like going forward. Very likely, the United States will have to oversee the transition of power, right? The creation of a new election system, the overseeing of that, the putting down of the gangs and the cartels and the foreign guerrillas and everything else. Hopefully finding a way to get rid of maybe Hezbollah, Hamas, and Cuban intelligence services, and probably kicking out the Chinese Communist Party. There's a lot of work to be done in Venezuela. Donald Trump is actually saying that America is going to be probably governing or running Venezuela for a few years now. And we'll see what that looks like. But on that topic also, it's possible America could also soon be running Greenland because Trump wants to buy it. And he's talking about this very seriously. Newsmax said this. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told lawmakers this week that President Donald Trump wants to acquire Greenland through a purchase rather than military action. Maybe we won't invade you. We'd like to buy you. As the administration says, revisits a long-standing proposal that has triggered sharp pushback from European allies and renewed debate over U.S. strategy in the Arctic. And it says further in, later Tuesday, the White House said Trump had not ruled out military options, meaning he might do it, and said, quote, President Trump has made it well known that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority to the United States, and it's vital to deter our adversaries in the Arctic region, the statement said. Now, Trump also spoke about Greenland during a press gaggle in Air Force One earlier this week, and he said Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security, and Denmark is not going to be able to do it.
By the way, I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true.
Sir,
they thought that was a great move.
What would the justification be for a claim to Greenland? What would the justification?
Oh, I don't want to talk about Greenland now. I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it. And they know that.
Now, there's something else interesting happening. There's a lot of focus suddenly on America preparing for war. There's a lot of focus right now on stopping potential war almost took place. There's a lot of focus now pushing back against the invasion channels of the Chinese Communist Party in Russia. And interestingly, there's also now talk of Trump wanting to put about $500 billion more into defense spending. And Trump announced he's putting a freeze on the defense industrial complex, basically saying that this is going to be in place unless these companies up their game and start producing new and effective military equipment. Something's going on. Let me show you this. Trump said on Truth Social, all United States defense contractors and the defense industry as a whole, beware. While we make the best military equipment in the world, no other country even is close, he says, defense contractors are currently issuing massive dividends to their shareholders and massive stock buybacks at the expense and detriment of investing in plants and equipment. The situation will no longer be allowed or tolerated. Now, like on this front, it's an unfortunate reality. If you're a defense contractor, if you're in the business side of it, there's a lot of money, okay? There's a lot of money in defense. And I know guys who've tried to get defense contracts like manufacturing and strategy and stuff like that. What they'll say is if you sell to the Pentagon, put an extra couple zeros on the end of every number. They sell much higher knowingly to the Pentagon because they know they'll pay it. There's a lot of overspending, there's a lot of bad spending, there's a lot of money finagling, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off defense. And Trump is basically saying this will no longer be allowed or tolerated, at least on like the finagling with the stock dividends and buybacks and things like that. They're changing the industry. And Trump is trying to, it seems, make this more focused on actual defense production. Making sure, look, we pay a lot of money for defense, make sure it's going to that, not just making people rich. This is not a way to make a lot of money. This is because America needs to be defended and have the best stuff possible. Trump says this, also executive pay packages in the defense industry are exorbitant and unjustifiable given how slowly these companies are delivering vital equipment to our military and our allies. It's the reality on this front. We don't have a lot of wartime production. The defense companies that get the contracts, they don't manufacture nearly fast enough to support a full-scale war. In fact, the situation is so bad that towards the end of the Biden administration said defense production is so lacking that we would probably lose a war with China just because of lack of defense production, based on that alone. And so Trump is saying salaries, stock options, and every other form of compensation are far too high for these executives. Defense companies are not producing our great military equipment rapidly enough, and once produced, are not maintaining it properly or quickly. From this moment forward, these executives, he says, must build new and modern production plants. In other words, more defense manufacturing, more defense production. Trump is trying to renew defense production. He says both for delivering and maintaining this important equipment, and he says for building the latest models and future military equipment. He says until they do so, no executive should be allowed to make in excess of $5 million, which, as high as it sounds, is a mere fraction of what they're making now. In other words, if they want to make money, they need to put the money where the mouth is and start really pumping things out and getting the industry working full steam to support an actual war. That's what they're talking about here. They want to have, Trump wants to have the defense industry working at a pace of production and repair where they could actually support a full-scale war. And Trump says, additionally, the maintenance and repair of equipment once sold is far too slow and must be immediately enhanced. As president, I'm demanding that maintenance be spot on time. Therefore, I will not permit dividends or stock buybacks for defense companies until such a time as these problems are rectified. Likewise, for salaries and executive compensation. Industry somewhat frozen in some regards until they actually get things working full steam to support a war. Trump says military equipment is not being made fast enough. It will be built now with the dividends, stock buybacks, and overcompensation of executives rather than borrowing from financial institutions or getting the money from your government. So, in other words, instead of using the money they're getting to, give the extra weekend package to the executives, instead of doing these things, they're just sending money to everybody. They're going to have to take that money and actually build the products that they're being given the money for in the first place. Actually put the money to good use and really build up the industry. Trump says longer term, this is good for both executives and shareholders because it will be great for our country. Now, I'm going to read between the tea leaves. This is what I'm going to say with this. Something is going on with defense right now. Something is going on with national security. Because let's look at the big picture, okay? Let's look at the whole picture here. Trump wants to have wartime production. Defense industry not building fast enough. He's basically taking a very, very, very strong move to force defense manufacturers to focus more on, again, repair and production. Building more factories, producing more, supporting us enough to build basically an arsenal. Venezuela is a big deal. Why is that? Because China was trying to start a war there. Qin Canrong, main advisor to Xi Jinping, wanted to have a war in Latin America and Russia and in the Middle East, with Iran being a focus. Then they would invade Taiwan. They almost had it. Venezuela, alongside Brazil, were preparing to invade Guyana, just to the north of them. By doing what he did, Trump probably avoided a regional war, if not a global war, because China would have jumped on that. So he did that. He's also taking 30 to 50 million barrels of oil. Why is that important? What happened to the American oil stockpiles under the Biden administration? Does anybody remember? They drained them. America needs to rebuild its oil stockpiles for war. There was concern that if we went to war, we wouldn't have enough oil. We need oil. And so taking that oil, whether you like how Trump did it or not, will actually rebuild America's oil stockpile. So you have wartime production, the avoidance of a massive war. You have Trump now saying he wants to increase American defense spending by another $500 billion from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. That's a huge increase. And he's talking about taking Greenland, if not buying it, then literally invading possibly and taking it. They're saying they're not ruling out military force. Why is that? It's because it is so strategically important in the event of war with Russia or China that America cannot afford to not have it. What does this tell you if you look at the whole picture? Defending against Russia and China in the Arctic, defending against Russia and China in Latin America, defending against the CCP's war plans for Venezuela specifically, defending against what it will possibly be, of course, the whole drug trade and pushing China out of Latin America and that whole thing, the revival of the Monroe Doctrine, pushing against the cartels, pushing for, again, the strategic locations in Greenland to build up defenses, and also make sure America, if we did go to war, could actually have enough military equipment to build and repair to actually win. Are they preparing for something? Something weird's going on, I can say that at least. Or Trump is just saying, hey, you know what? And by the way, Trump is also working on the warship production. Remember, he had the Trump-class destroyers? They also just announced that. And wartime production of warships. Something's going on. Now, you could say, well, it's because our military production just hasn't been very good. American defense has been lacking. Maybe Trump is just fixing it. That might be the case too. Who knows? But Trump right now is putting systems in place that, once developed, will ensure that America could win a war with China if it were to happen. That's why this matters so much. Trump just, within the past couple weeks, changed, although it's going to be a couple-year time frame, changed the entire trajectory of whether or not we would win or lose a war with China. If he's able to do everything he's done now, we would probably fix all the problems we would have ran into, which is lack of manufacturing and lack of security in key defensive regions. Trump just did a big old checkmate on the CCP. It's a big deal. All right, everyone, that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into it. Let's see here. And let's see. First off, Raf, you're saying, we need Greenland because we have no choice. The commie world has pushed us to this. Yeah, it's not, okay, like, you haven't seen a country just take another country like this in a while, at least not a developed country, okay? You could argue, okay, Russia being like, hey, Crimea is now part of our country. Sorry, buddy. Sorry, but not sorry. Guess what? It used to be the capital of Russia, so it's ours again. You had that. Trump saying, hey, remember when there used to be an independent country called Greenland? Wasn't that interesting? Well, good thing it's not anymore. It's part of America. Trump right now taking Greenland is a very big deal. And it is true, basically, that you could argue that America is challenging it's not really a sovereign country, it's under Denmark, but Trump is challenging the sovereignty of this country, and, kind of he is, but you could also say that China and Russia are doing the same thing. And The other problem you have is that if they can build systems there, if they can build missile systems, if they can build defensive systems, that's the Cuban Missile Crisis, but more severe. This will be more severe than the Cuban Missile Crisis. And why is that? When we look at a map, we usually look at the kind of flattened image. Look at a globe and look at where Greenland is in proximity to Russia. Look at where Greenland is in proximity to Russia. Greenland, if they got a port in that area or got a place there, would present more of a direct threat to the United States than Cuba would. Because Russia, they had the reason we had the Cuban Missile Crisis is because Russian warships had to sail all the way out there into American territory, really, and they wanted to drop off warheads. If they wanted to do that in Greenland, it would be very easy if they had it. It would be very easy. And the other side, too, if they can put warships up there, if they can put military equipment up there, put jets up there, if they could build up an entire defensive or war-fighting, arsenal up there, if we were to go to war with Russia or China, that is where the war would be launched from. Has anybody out there played the game Risk? That little board game? Anyone play Risk? How hard is it to invade America in the game of Risk? It's very hard, right? The reason is America is set up geographically like a bastion. It's very hard to attack America. You have, of course, large defensive regions, oceans on both sides, and then you have, of course, Latin America, Mexico being kind of a narrower channel. Very hard to attack America. Canada, you could say, well, we have a buffer to the north and it's very cold way north, but that would be the easiest invasion route, especially because the next closest neighbor up there is going to be Russia. And China could work very easily with them. They also share a border with Russia. Transporting north would not be that difficult. And that would be what a war would look like. If they wanted to launch a missile attack, air incursions, if they wanted to do dropping their guys, paratroopers into the American heartland, avoiding the key military regions we have on the East Coast and West Coast, that would be how they do it. That would be what a war would look like, an actual invasion. And so I don't know if that's what they're preparing for. They are suggesting it. The reason Trump says it's really important for our national security, why is that? It's for that exact reason. So maybe they know something we don't know. Maybe they're trying to prevent it from happening. We don't know. Joshua Bushard, you're saying Greenland is also in the path of any ICBMs, meaning it is possible, it is a possible place to put missile defenses. Yeah, so intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? The carriers for nuclear warheads. And it is true. And that's a good point. If Russia were to place nuclear weapons silos in, let's say, the north of Russia, or China were to put them there even, and they wanted to launch a missile attack on the United States, nuclear war, well, you kind of want to have really nearby interceptors. Now, the interceptors, they're different, right? They have basically the way ICBMs work. They go into orbit or low orbit, and that point where they go up and then down, that point right here is their most vulnerable point. That is where you have to intercept them. And so having interceptors relatively close to that point is the necessary way you would need to do it. Meaning, you kind of need to be a little close. It's why it's such a big deal, by the way, when America was putting ICBM interceptors in South Korea, for example. It's why the CCP makes such a stink about America trying to put interceptors in the Philippines and in the surrounding regions. That's why it's such a big deal. It would be the same thing with Greenland. And that's a good point to mention too. Martin McKenzie, you're saying it's happening everywhere. One of the results of mass migration and out of control corporate manipulation of the marketplace, they want to turn us all into peasants. You're talking about the housing market. Yeah, so you're right, it is a big deal everywhere. And there's another side to this. I noticed, because I travel a lot doing reporting, I noticed actually the cost of living in a lot of countries is kind of now globally set. When I was down in Panama researching, the border crisis, I was really shocked. The cost of groceries is not that much cheaper. The cost of goods is not that much cheaper. And you could say, well, Josh, you were looking at tourist prices. I was not. I went down to the Darien Gap. I was in the middle of nowhere. Even in the middle of nowhere, you're paying like American prices for food, for groceries, for like everything. There's been a global price fixing that took place. Some countries are a bit better. If you go to like South Korea or Taiwan, groceries are actually pretty cheap there. The cost of food is a lot lower. The cost of eating out's a lot lower too. And it's interesting the way their countries have kind of done that. It's because the cultures are so heavy around eating out and you don't tip that there's a ton of money in it. And so because they constantly have business, the restaurants can keep their prices pretty low. And because there's so much competition for it, they don't have to charge that much. And the competition drives down the prices. It's actually really easy out there. But real estate in those countries is horrible. I remember talking to people and asking about how much an apartment costs. You're looking at like New York prices for not very nice apartments in Taiwan and stuff. You're looking at like millions for really small places. And so you find this everywhere, as you're noting. In Canada, it's like this. It's horrible in Canada because their building codes, because of environmental protections, and their zoning laws and the red tape you have, it's really hard to build new properties. And a lot of the money, frankly, a lot of the Canadian economy, which is crazy to think about, is not an actual production of anything. It's just in capital inflow. Let that sink in. That's crazy, right? A lot of the Canadian economy is not really producing much. It's capital inflow. It's Chinese buying up real estate. It's Indians buying up real estate. It's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. I mean, it's not all. Of course, they have some trade stuff with America, like timber and oil and stuff, but a lot of it is capital inflow. And so that's not a way, you can keep your economy going like that, right? You can technically keep your economy afloat, but you will do it to the detriment of the well-being of your people. Because what you're playing with, what you're making money on, is the squeeze of the basic standards of living. The squeeze, really squeezing every drop of money you can out of them. Because, what do you need to live? You need a home, and you need food, and you need medical care too. So if you can squeeze these three industries, the three necessities, people cannot just go without them. You can't not have a home. I mean, you can, but you really don't want to in Canada when it's freezing out. You need to have a roof over your head in some of these areas. You're going to freeze to death. People need homes, right? People need food, and people need basic care. If you can control these industries and then just squeeze people with them, you will force them to pay you. They won't have a choice. And if you can create a monopoly of these industries, push out competition, eliminate new construction, you manufacture a monopoly. You're an investment firm, you're a bank, you're a foreign buyer, you have a monopoly. You can then price fix and you can squeeze everybody. And this is a global problem too. Real estate internationally has become an investment piece. Real estate in many countries is not even being bought up by the locals. It's being bought up by foreigners or by firms or banks and everything else. Some countries put limits on. I know if you go to I think if you go to Mexico, they give you like a 99-year lease technically, or a limit. I know it used to be the case. I don't know if it still is. So if you're American, you can never technically own a home there. You can pass on generationally. Same thing at Costa Rica had similar stuff. Some countries have that, but that doesn't solve the problem of investment firms, banks, and transnational corporations and so on buying all that up. And what that looks like is this: globally, they buy it up, they squeeze people, which then increases the value of the product, because they make it so you can't build more, so they have a monopoly on it, meaning the price of it goes up as demand goes up. and they can just make people pay them an insane amount of money. And if you bring in other things like the type of investment banks can do based on holdings, they can use that to in turn invest money in stock, stock markets or whatever else, because they can basically count the value of those holdings as part of their actual holdings, which they can then invest. And so there's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot of reason. I'm not saying they're wrong for doing it per se, like they were allowed to do it. It's a great way to make money. But the consequence of it has just been the quality of life globally has really taken a nosedive. The ability of, it is the case where people are working 2 jobs and they can barely afford rent. And in some countries like Taiwan, I just mentioned, it's a really bad example, an example of a really bad situation. Like, you get paid so little and you pay basically New York prices for rent, okay? It is really hard to live. This is a global problem. And on that point too, remember what Trump said, he's announcing this program for America right now, that he's not going to allow these firms and investment firms and so on to be buying up new, not old, but new single-family homes. He said he's also going to make this a point at Davos. So he seems to be interested in making this a global policy. We'll see how that goes. Denise B., you're saying maybe U.S. children should be taught some recent Venezuelan history. Show my special feature if you do. I'm not just tooting my horn here. The special feature I did that I've been talking about, I show you a lot of it's not that long. You can watch it real easy. I show you a lot of historical context that is super interesting. It shows, I believe what you're referring to, Denise, is how socialism just destroyed their economy. But I also show a lot of the behind-the-scenes finagling that took place and what the agendas were. On the point of, I believe, what you were talking about, it's true. Socialism can rapidly destroy an economy, really rapidly. Venezuela is one of the clearest examples of that. I mean, there's been a lot. You could say Cuba went through the same thing. They used to be a beautiful country. Mexico is technically a socialist country. It used to be a really nice country too. Utterly destroyed by criminality, corruption, and socialism. China was great before the CCP. Yeah, the last dynasty collapsed, and they had trouble after that. But early mid 1800s and so on, they were modernizing quite a bit. You could have mistaken parts of China for the same place as Western Europe was. You have a lot of countries that were destroyed by communism and socialism. A lot of countries destroyed by it. But Venezuela is a really drastic example because it shows like a very nice place to live. Like, I'm not just saying that. Like you're talking like California living, you know what I mean? Really nice place to live. California, maybe in the 80s, okay? Nice place to live. Going from that to being one of the poorest countries on earth. And there's some really horrible stories of people who lived through that. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, so a lot of people have lived through it. But what that was like when maybe you're a woman and you go from having a very good lifestyle, a very healthy life, a very good home situation, to being extremely poor and seeing gangs basically take over your country. Sounds like New York, right? This current time. It sounds like New York a bit, but I think the point is here. In America, we think we're immune to that. We think that'll never happen here. It very easily could. Because as much as we'd like to think we're different, we're not that different from a lot of Latin America. We really aren't. The cultural makeup, the racial makeup, it's not that different, actually. They're basically the same race mix as most Americans are, especially if you get into countries like, Venezuela and Argentina. A little more Germans there for some reason. Why did that happen? You tell me. But the racial mix in these countries is not that different from the United States, and the culture is not that different. The main difference being they were more of a Catholic base and we're more of a Protestant base. That's really about it. The way that their countries were destroyed and ruined could easily be applied to the United States. The weaponization of criminality. and just really bad economic policy. You combine those two things, America will very quickly become just like Latin America, very quickly. And I would actually argue that maybe some people wanted that. Maybe that's what's been going on with the light on crime policies. Maybe what's been going on with them sending the gangs here, with them sending Tren de Aragua here and MS-13 here, with them bringing the cartels here. I would actually argue, on the surface at least as well, that is part of the CCP's use of the drug trade to do that. I've been referring to it as the weaponization or the ecosystem of corruption. There's an ecosystem to corruption. And if you want to hear it as simply as possible, it's this. If corruption can control politics, because that's what corruption does, right? You corrupt a system, you make it corrupt, and then you influence the politics. That's corruption. If corruption controls politics, whoever controls the corruption controls the system. That is the ecosystem of corruption. And that is how a regime will use criminality as a tool to control a country. This is not even just CCP unrestricted warfare. Machiavelli and the Prince talked about the exact same thing, using like the Italian mafia for similar purposes. You can conquer a country using mafia tactics. You can conquer a country using weaponized criminality. This was even understood hundreds of years ago in Western Europe, right? Machiavelli. This is not some foreign concept. We just don't talk about it anymore. Nebulius, you're saying America needs more manufacturing and more small family farms. Large multinational corporations are destroying America. I agree, actually. If you actually look at the way America used to be, like late 1900s, we were, 89? It was like 90%, like high 90% of Americans were farmers. Part of the earlier vision for the United States, like Thomas Jefferson, the view of Americans would be that we're more of an agrarian people, right? That we all have our own little slice of heaven, right? We all have our white picket fence and the dog running in the yard and the tires swing, and we have our nice big garden, our family farm in the backyard. Part of the idea of America was that. I love the idea. I also don't think everybody wants to be a farmer these days. I know you're not saying that, actually. But I do think it is a problem that multinational corporations, foreign governments, foreign investment firms are not only buying up real estate, they're buying up farms. They're buying up farms. It's not even just China. It's a lot of countries doing it. And if your farms and, industrial farming is just controlled by foreign holders, you don't control your food security. That is a concern for the United States. On that point too, this is another point with the whole MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. If you really get to the gist of it, what RFK Jr. has been talking about, he's talking about food additives and chemical additives and ultra-processed foods and all kinds of stuff, the entire list of problems we have. He's actually saying that when you dig down to the very bottom of it, it's going to go back to soil restoration and the restoration of small farms. Soil restoration is going to be a big thing. They're kind of digging to it, pun not intended, but they're kind of digging down to doing that right now. And I do believe that once they get there, you're going to see a lot more emphasis put on small farms. In fact, I would say even the food pyramid now they're doing could put a lot more emphasis on small farms. I hope they do more for it. I know a lot of American farmers are really being squeezed. They're really being squeezed. And, that's something we can't afford to lose, right? Not that we have a lot of farms, but we can't afford to lose that. Cassandra Lippiade, you're saying, it amazes me that climate change warriors gung-ho on saving the planet from polluters have a house filled with made in China. Kind of ironic, right? Kind of ironic. And actually, that's a great point too, okay? If Europe and the European powers and if all the big voices in America calling for the need to save the environment wanted to actually fight climate change, what would be the easiest way to do it? They would not be advocating for America to destroy its energy industry. Even what is considered unclean energy is more clean than most of what you have in the rest of the world. If you get into like coal energy and stuff like that, like I think the only emission in modern systems is hydrogen. There's no pollutant for the most part. It's actually very, it doesn't, we're told it's all dirty energy, but it's not. It's very clean actually. The efficiency of the American energy infrastructure industry is very good. But you go to countries like China and India and a lot of the third world, it's very bad. If you wanted to actually fight climate change, this is what you would do. America would go into Africa, America would go into Latin America, America would go into different parts of Asia, and we would have an energy production initiative. We would be building nuclear and coal, probably. And maybe some other stuff, but not electric and not solar, because they're actually not sustainable. The stuff you need to produce them is not sustainable, and very polluting also, just in other ways. Like you destroy your soil, you destroy your water. It's really not a clean industry. We've been told it is, but it's not. But on the point of China, if these people talking about fighting climate change really believed in it, they would first of all hold the CCP accountable. They wouldn't get a free pass in the Paris Climate Accord like they did. They wouldn't be having that. You would have a program saying pull industries out of China, pull factories out of China, get the money we're pouring into it out of there, because we are propping up the biggest polluter on the face of the planet. Why would you want that if you actually believed in these narratives? And for that note, why do some of the biggest voices not only not do that, but they even cater to the CCP? How many of these big companies trying to lecture us about green energy, are basically eating out of the hand of the CCP? Censor on their behalf, won't say anything bad about them, are full in on everything they do. Like how many? A lot of them. I'd say most of them, in fact. So we're being sold a real a two-faced narrative. It's really two-faced. Two-faced and not effective, frankly. It's rules for thee and not for me. And they're actually, by advocating for the destruction of the American industry, the American energy industry, the American manufacturers, they're actually causing, if you believe in climate change, they're actually causing more pollution by gutting it here and allowing it to get moved over there. They're actually causing more of a problem by doing so. Emotion 007, you're saying the propaganda machine is starting again before the midterm. Yeah, get ready for it. Has anybody ever seen the movie Around the World in 80 Days? There's a scene in it where, it's a British, right? Jules Verne, right? There's a scene in it where, they're going around the world, and was it Bosphore asks the guy, he says, they go to America during election season, and he's like, wow, is this a religious procession? Is this a religious ceremony? Because, you have these guys campaigning and American flags everywhere and so on. It's like, anyways, that's our system. The American political system, while patriotic and grand, also has a very vicious side to it, which is the propaganda side where everybody's campaigning, and also the black propaganda side, which is the name they have for it, where you destroy your enemies. And so every election season also has the election scandal. What will the scandal be this time? We will soon find out, okay? But Trump, it used to be the Democrats do it more. Trump kind of changed all that. Trump hits them just as hard, if not harder. American politics can be pretty vicious, especially during this time, as are politics in most free countries that have elections. And so we're going to be dealing with a lot of that. I'd assume we're also going to be hearing a lot more about banging the drums of war because something weird is going on. And Trump is very interested in rapidly assuring American national security, rapidly all at once and in very extreme ways, like literally kidnapping the presidents of other countries, extreme ways, and talking about invading totally peaceful countries. That is how serious the concerns of national security are suddenly right now. I don't know the reason for this, but I look at patterns, right? I look at patterns and trajectories, and I try to understand stuff. So there's a weird pattern right now. The weird pattern is there's a sudden massive focus on extreme policies to ensure American national security defense production. Something's going on. I don't know what it is. Maybe we just avoided a war. Maybe it's what I've been talking about, that the Chinese Communist Party's war plans were basically ready to get kicked off. Maybe Trump just pulled the old Trump card out, pulled the old ace out of his sleeve, right? And said, nope, nice try, see you later, buddy. He kind of did. Trump, let me put it this way. If a war was going to happen with Taiwan or whatever, and Russia and Iran right now, Trump's actions against Iran, disabling their nuclear capabilities and effectively crippling the regime and the protests that are happening right now, Trump's actions in Venezuela, preventing the invasion of Guyana with Brazil, Brazil working with Maduro, these two factors alone probably avoided World War III. And you're not going to hear this from a lot of people, but I've been talking about this before Russia invaded Ukraine, and everything I said would happen has now happened. Let's put it that way, right? Why did I know it? It's because the CCP said it. They weren't hiding it. And I'll say right now, the current moves probably avoided World War III. I was very concerned about it. I told a lot of you, if you were watching like a year ago, I was very concerned about this. That has now been about 90% avoided. Let that sink in. That was avoided. And the additional moves being done right now will basically assure that within the next 2 to 3 year time frame, America will have the defense production capabilities and defensive regions. I assume if we don't get Greenland, we're probably going to militarize the northern parts of Canada. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. If we don't, or maybe we'll do both. But I think also the CCP's time frame on when they think they can challenge America will also be off the table. This is checkmate. You just watch checkmate happen. World War III is off the table in my personal take. It's not going to happen anymore. And on that point, folks, thank you so much for being here. What do you think? Am I on the ball? Am I spot on? Do you disagree with me? Do you think I'm missing something? Let me know in the chat. Do you think that America should just keep taking countries? We already got one. We're going for two. Why not take Canada while we're at it? What are they doing? Come on. I'm half joking, okay? But what do you think? Let me know in the chat. Questions, comments, anything you want to talk about too for next episode. And that said, also do not forget to watch our new report on Venezuela. I have the new special report out. If you're on Epoch TV, you can watch it literally right now. And if you're on YouTube, you can also watch it literally right now by clicking a link, okay? We have that in the chat, so be sure to check that out. And also, you can go in the description. That said, I will see you all again tomorrow because we have prime time this week, so be sure to watch prime time. That said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves. And as always, stay informed and stay free. Thank you.